Please welcome to the stage Chief Analyst at Google Threat Intelligence Group, Mr. John Hultquist.
Good morning. It's a real honor to be talking to this group of heavy-duty nerds from the defense industry. You guys are all way smarter than me, so it's really impressive to be in this group. But I'm from Google. I came in through an acquisition. That's how I got hired by Google. Would have never made it into the normal process. I came in through with the Mandiant Group, and then before that, Eyesight Partners. My experience is mostly in the cyber intelligence side. I had started out many years ago in the government space as sort of the Russia hand, came over to the private sector where we sort of learned that we could track cyber espionage. We didn't even know when I came over that we could track cyber espionage outside of the government. We slowly learned how to track a variety of different actors and actions around the world. A lot of that insight comes from things like Mandiant Incident Response, but also comes from things like being forward deployed. We're in Ukraine. We're in Taiwan, and we're in the Gulf region and just about everywhere in the world where there's a ton of activity going on, so we can sort of get early insight into threat actors. And so what I wanted to do is cram as much of that insight as I could into 30 minutes. Ironically, I actually skipped the Iranians. They asked me for my slides last week, and feeling a little funny about that. But if I see an opportunity, I'll try to throw some insight around some of their activity in here as well. The first thing I want to talk to, and I guess it definitely is a good follow-up for that video we kicked off with, is the threat from China. Whenever I'm talking about this threat and sort of the challenge here, there are really three major issues that I focus on. The first thing is that these actors are not the same actors that I started dealing with 15, 20 years ago, right? Those were the actors that we joked around about, and we'd made fun of, and we thought were really silly. They've come a long way. They have been making investments in their capability, and those investments are paying out. They are moving towards peer status. Some of their actors are at peer status. Some of their actors are very serious. Most of their actors are far more difficult than they used to be, and a serious challenge for defenders. The other problem that we have with the Chinese threat is that there's just too many of them. The term that we use internally, or the joke is too many typhoons. There are so many of them, right? They're fielding a ton of different intrusion teams that we have to track and are sort of independently evolving and capable of different things and have different missions. And it becomes a real problem for defenders to just stay on top of all these actors. And the last thing is these guys are increasingly aggressive. China is very different from what we call sometimes we talk about the big four: Iran, North Korea, China, Russia, who are the actors that make up a great deal of the activity that we deal with. In the big four, China is very different from their peers. Whereas their peers have been very aggressive when it comes to cyber attack, disruptive, destructive attack, China's never really crossed that line, or has done that in very limited circumstances. We can see now that they're carrying out these sort of probing attempts into critical infrastructure, particularly U.S. critical infrastructure, that's probably designed to affect us militarily. And it's sort of a new age for the threat. Let's talk about the evolution. When we saw Chinese activity back in the day, or when we looked at Chinese activity back in the day, it typically played out like this. There was a social engineering email that was sent to users. It was laughably written, like very poorly written. We would post them literally in the cubicle, like thumbtack them up in the cubicle as a joke. They would move through the network with this clunky malware that set off a lot of alarms. It was really loud, and their operations were sort of easy to find. Once they called out of the network, it wasn't unusual for them to call straight to Shanghai, right? What we see now is less focus on social engineering. They still do social engineering, but less focus on social engineering and more focus on the network edge, right? That means they don't have to talk to an individual who may or may not read something and say and raise an alarm. That means their 0 days last a lot longer. That means they can target devices that oftentimes you can't put an EDR on, right? And then they use that beachhead to move across the network. When they move across the network, increasingly they're living off the land and not just not overly reliant on malware, especially when it comes to these intrusions that are hitting our critical infrastructure. And then when they call out, instead of calling out to Shanghai, they're calling out to these sophisticated botnet networks that are designed to make their activity very difficult, that are ephemeral and designed to make their activity very hard to track. We'll get into all that in a second. Also, increasingly, we can see more and more supply chain targeting from these actors as well. What about the 0 day problem? So China has been leading all of their peers when it comes to zero days, the 0 days that they're pumping out. They are increasingly 0 days on network appliances on the edge, but very almost ironically, they're really interested in the security appliances. Why the security appliances on the edge? Because those appliances, in many cases, don't allow you to put EDR, right? So I think I was in a small island country not long ago, talking to their defense people about what the problem here is. The problem here is that imagine you're responsible for the defense of an island, and you've got scouts and reconnaissance people and people whose job it is to look out for an attack all over your island. But the one place you can't put them is on the beach. We're giving these guys an open beachhead in our networks where we can't put EDR and find them. And that gives them the opportunity to build out a really successful attack. This 0 day production is fueled by an industrialized or whole of government or whole of society approach that involves academia, contractors, government organizations, all working together to pump out these 0 days. These things are inevitable now. A few years ago, we used to talk about this stuff, and I used to say, it's kind of looking like there's going to be more 0 days in security devices in the next year. That's not the case anymore. I can guarantee you there will be more 0 days in security devices moving forward. There'll be lots and lots of them. This is not just like a hypothetical trend. I promise you this is going to happen again and again and again and again. They recognize the value here. They're invested in that value. There is bureaucracy and money being pumped into that value. They have a number of competitions. If you can get insight into what the hacking competitions, if you can see what the actual, when you can see what the actual devices that they're hacking are, the lists are exactly the same as the 0 days that are showing up right here, right? They've literally got a process for finding these things and making sure they get to the users. I'm sorry, the hackers that need them. The other thing we see more and more from these actors is that they've just got these teams that are sort of have incredibly deep experience and expertise in singular products, right? So there are actors who are almost get like associated with products because they've shown so much deep interest and knowledge of that product. What does that pay out for them? Well, first off, it makes it easier to develop a 0 day in that product, right? If you know everything there is to know about that product. It also makes it easy to pivot on that product once you get in there. So we're seeing specialized malware built just for that product, which we know doesn't have an EDR, so that when they get there, they can operate, as efficiently as possible. And the third thing that we see, and this is a really good example, is we can see these actors just blow through our mitigations, right? So this is an example. An actor, Ivanti, found a 0 day in their VPN, went public with it pretty quick cycle. Vonti's did a really good job here. They provided initial mitigation on January 10th. 9 days later, these guys were already had mitigation. Like they already figured out how to bypass that mitigation. They were already operating basically with new 0 days. That's the benefit of having this deep expertise in the product, right? And for them, this is this is a great investment. Why is it such a good investment? How much does a 0 day pay off? Well, we rarely get to see how deep these actors get to use a single 0 day, how much payout they got to. In one case, we had one case a couple years ago where we could actually see the full extent of some of the targeting. We could see the clusters they hit and how long the activity went. They had 8 months of basically uninterrupted value out of that 1 0 day where they used it to target hundreds of victims, most of them in the organizations that you guys are trying to protect, right? Most of them are in the defense space, government space, military space. They get tremendous value out of single 0 days. It is an absolutely great use of their time and money. Living off the land. Again, this has been particularly something that we've seen from the Volt Typhoon actors, coupled with the Orb networks, which I'm going to get into in a second ago. If nothing else, this just reduces their signature. One of the things that I guess one of our friends at NSA said at a conference not long ago is when they're talking about Volt Typhoon, they talk to the critical infrastructure operators in the private sector. And the private sector folks first thing they say is, give me the IOCs. And what's the answer? There are no IOCs, right? The things that they're doing, right, are designed to reduce those sorts of signatures. I'm not saying that, listen, for years, the thing that everybody said in our space was that we're not rising to the level of the adversary, or we're not getting better, or we're not trying enough. I don't think that's the case anymore. I don't think that's the case here. The problem is that, yes, we're getting better, but so are they, right? We may have invested in security, but they're also investing in security. There's a lot of folks who sort of compare safety and security problems in my space, and there's a lot of lessons we can learn from the safety side. But the difference between us and safety is, in safety, you are fighting the immutable laws of physics, right? Those things largely don't change. This actor is constantly changing, right? They are getting better. And so even if we are getting better, we're finding ways to track their signatures, we're sharing data, they're just going to figure out a way to get rid of that signature. The other way they get rid of that signature, the Orb network. All right, so what is this? There are... we talked about back in the day when the command and control was based, I kid you not, right back to home base. They would call right home, and we knew exactly where the office of the PLA organization was. They got a lot better than that, right? And they started buying VPSs or compromising random servers out on the internet. What we've seen since then is the creation of essentially botnets that are created using either VPSs that they've purchased or Soho routers that they've compromised. Soho router is a small office, home office router, right? So here's what's happening is a contractor in China is basically going out and compromising these routers all over the world, right? And like your dentist's office, right? And they're building a huge botnet, and then the actor will essentially traverse this botnet down to the last node that comes to you. And that last node, let's say if you work right here, could be right down the street. It could be a hotel that's right down the street. And so that traffic looks fairly normal when you're looking at it. But the real advantage of these botnets is they're ephemeral. They're constantly washing them, changing them out. And so, if you find that IP address, that IOC, it will not last very long anymore. They are changing. They're moving faster and faster, right? So, there's a real speed dynamic here with these adversaries. We've gotten better at 0 days. Well, they've gotten better at sort of overcoming our mitigations. We've gotten better at sharing data. Well, they'll just make sure that data is not valuable for very long. Slide. And so, and what about the aggressive stuff here? I'm sure you guys have got access, or a lot of you guys have access to really hot information on this. So I'm giving it from sort of a different perspective. But here's what we can see is when we first started looking at the activity that's probably best known as Volt Typhoon. It was mostly focused on the United States, mostly focused on targets that had some sort of relationship to the military's ability to deploy. I was in the Army a billion years ago, and one of the things they taught me to do was put all of our gear on a train. The average military unit actually, when they deploy, they put all their gear on a train. That train goes to a boat, and the boat actually sends most of that stuff around the world. So what did we see targeting of? Things like rail lines and things like ports, right? We also saw targeting of energy and water and places, some of which were interestingly close to military bases. Since then, there have been more targeting. Some of it has been less clearly associated with military targets. That could be a visibility gap for us, but the original thinking was that there was a focus on sort of disrupting the ability to react, right? Now, is the military going to be able to get on those trains and get that stuff to war? Absolutely. That's going to happen, right? And I think this is a really important thing to think about when it comes to disruptive capability. It's usually not about long-term damage, especially with cyber, right? Of course, there are ways to really break things. But usually when it comes to cyber, it's usually about short-term disruptions. Can you break something at just the right time where you can have the right where it can have the right effects on somebody's operation? A classic real-world example of this was the Viasat incident. Is anybody familiar with the Viasat incident? The war in Ukraine lit off. I get a call from a friend of mine who works in an oil and gas company, and he said all our gas stations in Poland are down. And it's because they couldn't, because their satellite communications have basically been knocked offline. What happened was that APT-44, the GRU, had gained access to the Viasat satellites and leveraged that access to wipe Viasat modems right at the eve of the invasion. Classic sort of C4 ISR stuff. Did they get all that stuff back online? Absolutely. It's the timing that matters, right? Can you do it? Can you break something at just the right time when it's absolutely imperative, right? And that's a really important thing. We see more and more of these incidents with Volt Typhoon that some people are questioning whether or not the incident or the target is or it's about impacting military capability, or it's about psychological impact. I'll tell you another important thing when it comes to cyber attack. Many of the actors who are behind cyber attack are mostly focused on psychological impact. That's their brief. That's their job, right? You can have a cyber attack far more able to create psychological impacts than it is to create real-world, lasting impacts. And these adversaries know it, and so they're trying to do things like, for instance, undermine our determination to respond militarily, right? And that's what they'll do. All right, Russia. When we talk about some mobile device targeting, one of the things that we've seen increasingly in Ukraine has been mobile device targeting. It comes in a variety of different flavors. The number one thing that I think it really should interest you guys, though, is that we're increasingly seeing close access operations on the front line. So somebody has a device that's basically connected to Ukrainian command or Ukrainian networks, military networks. They lose that device on the front line in the heat of battle, and somebody there is ready to basically gain access to that device and exploit it, right? This is a huge opportunity for these actors to basically get on a tactical level. What's really interesting about this is the actors who have a history of carrying out the real strategic impact, the psychological impact attacks on Ukraine's critical infrastructure, the ones that were tasked with doing this. And one of the theories inside is that maybe this was just a better use of their time, right? Maybe they needed to more clearly support the war effort by doing this close access stuff. Another thing we're seeing more and more of is targeting of particularly in Ukraine, but not just Ukraine, is targeting of Signal users. Signal allows you to do something called device linking, where you basically put you add an additional device to your account. We have seen many attempts to sort of create, and you can do it with a QR code. We've seen many spear phishing and attempts basically designed around this. Sometimes it's group invites. If you want to join this group, use this QR code, and then you've just linked your device to another device where they can read and siphon off your mail. We're also seeing we've seen some watering hole attempts around by APT29 as well, where they were basically using a iOS 0 day, and they're sitting on, I believe, on a government website, and then leveraging that to get government employees as they sort of check the website. The other thing that has come up again and again when it comes to Russia is just these blurred lines. Russia constantly pretends to be hacktivists. We can see them leveraging the accesses and tools from criminal actors. Sometimes for us, we can figure out, get to the bottom of that. Sometimes it's very confusing. There have been incidents in the United States, in Texas. There are water organizations that went down, and I saw it, I couldn't believe it, because the incident who claimed responsibility was the hacker who hacktivist group that claimed responsibility was the one that we had thought that Russia completely owned, like the GRU had fabricated. We'd even seen on YouTube them go out to YouTube and create the YouTube account, the GRU actors. So we just assumed the whole thing was GRU. And to this day, and I'm sure there's better information on the classified, so maybe you guys could go back to your offices and get better information than me. To this day, I don't know if these were hacktivists who were told to do it by the GRU. I don't know if it was one group the GRU started, and then they allowed other people in who carried out these attacks. They weren't very big deal attacks. They broke some stuff using default passwords. But the bigger lesson here is it's harder and harder to tell who's who in that space, especially when it comes to the attacks. This morning, an actor who has always carried out pro-Israeli attacks claimed an attack on a Russian bank. An Iranian banks. More and more you see these hacktivist elements. Sometimes they're real and sometimes they're fake, and it's very difficult to tell apart. The supply chain. There are a number of what I would refer to as apex predators moving around the supply chain right now. One you probably know best as Silk Typhoon. Another one you might know best as APT29. So Silk Typhoon is a Chinese actor. APT29 is a Russian actor. We were unfortunate enough to be touched by 29, or man, it was many years ago. I think there was sort of a misunderstanding of what was going on there. SolarWinds, yes, like the reporting said, thousands of people affected by SolarWinds. Well, the real truth is they weren't going after thousands of targets. What they were doing is they were coming through a means that allowed them to basically pick and choose the most interesting targets they could possibly ask for, right? Same scenario with the Microsoft incident. It's not necessarily about them getting to every organization they could possibly want. It's about them getting to the juiciest organizations because they're upstream. The really good actors are constantly trying to move upstream using the supply chain. 29 for instance, is going after a lot of technology companies, SaaS companies, to get upstream and move down. There will be more. This is like the 0-day thing. There will be more of these this year. Same with Silk Typhoon. There will be more incidents this year. You can almost guarantee they're going to be in other tech companies. Another player in the supply chain, I think as far back as I can remember, I've been doing this. I think this was a DIA a million years ago. The first major government supply chain incident I can remember was the North Koreans. The good news is North Korea has this insatiable desire for cash, right? And so they've actually sort of like pushed a lot of their real military and intelligence. They're still doing all that stuff, but like the big game guys is stealing money, right? And so a lot of their supply chain activity is focused on getting at cryptocurrency users and cryptocurrency exchanges and any way they can get their hands on this stuff, right? They are so effective in this. I've seen them actually chain supply chain incidents together. So imagine you have a supply chain incident, and you hit so many targets, and probably a lot of cryptocurrency targets, and then you hit a tech firm that has their own supply chain that they're operating, and you leverage that to go to all their customers. So they are chaining supply chain incidents together. This is another sort of inevitable situation. You're going to see more and more of this. Disruption. Why is supply chain so important to disruption? There are really kind of two good ways to do disruption in my experience. The first one is to get into critical infrastructure and work your way through it and get some really heavy-duty nerds, right, who understand critical infrastructure and ICS systems and build some bespoke capability and break it at the right time. You probably even want to get in there way ahead of time because it may, because so you can sort of lie in wait. The other way to do it is to come through the supply chain, hit a bunch of stuff at once, and with wipers, and then hope that something really big breaks. I could tell you two different incidents, Sandworm or whatever. This is APT44, the GRU. I've mentioned them a bunch of times already. Two major incidents that we talk about. The first time they turned out the lights, which they've done many, many times, was a really big deal. They turned out the lights in Ukraine. They literally broke the grid. The other incident was NotPetya. For my money, which is when they came in through a Ukrainian supply chain vendor, hit a lot of Ukrainian organizations at once, broke global shipping. Oreos couldn't get to shelves. Vaccine production stopped. It was a nightmare. For my money, the bigger effects were NotPetya, right? The supply chain can really push a disruptive attack over the edge. I'm running out of time. Let's see. I'm running out of time. I just want to get into generative AI real quick. Listen, here's the good news. The good news is generative AI, the adversary's been using actually for a very long time. This is the first case I remember seeing. This was an adversary using. Does anybody remember that website? It's like this face does not exist. So as soon as that thing popped up, adversaries were using that to create fake personas, right? The real capability that gets used the most by adversaries now is just the ability to fabricate text, video, and images, right? And audio. That's really where most of the activity is done. Good news, a lot of that could actually be done before, so it's not that big as detrimental or big a deal as it could be. We also see a lot of actors sort of using it as kind of a pumped up search engine, right? They're doing some of the reconnaissance and searching. We can also see them using the fabricating text as far as social engineering, with scripting and coding. They're kind of upping their game with scripting and coding, but it's not been terribly like game changing yet. So what does the future look like? And I know you guys are like real big AI, and I almost like question whether I should tell a group like this where you guys have so much expertise in this area, but the future, I think we're slowly getting a glimpse of it. We have found that AI is actually very capable of finding 0 days. In fact, potentially finding very different kinds of 0 days, the kinds that the artisanal Avanti guy may actually not be great at, right? And so there's some very real, we're probably facing a future where this stuff is actually, this capability is going to be used by adversaries sooner than later. The other concern we have is that this could just be used to sort of move faster, right? All the things you do in the network that a penetration tester does in the network can somebody do quicker, right? And so my other concern around 0 days is that, or N days, is that that time that we have to react is going to be shorter and shorter because we were basically fighting a more automated adversary. But we're watching, right? We're still watching this stuff. We have good visibility, and we haven't necessarily seen that play out yet. And I'll let you know when it does. This is my time. I just want to say, you know, when it comes to AI and so many of these things, it's very easy to sort of get stuck in, you know, future predictions and terminators and stuff like that. But there's very real intelligence out there that we're collecting every day, and let us be. And we all have limited resources, so let us be a guide point for you when you're trying to decide what problem to attack first. Many of these problems are way bigger for defenders than others, and I hope we can help there. Thank you all.